Good evening. You with Real Voices, and we're conducting another interview in the author cappers community. And today we have
T.D. Stanger.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for agreeing to get interviewed. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. And what was your expectations that influenced your decision to move into this neighborhood or even return back to this neighborhood? That's a two-part question depending on your status. Were you here before? Were you a new resident? But you can tell us, what was your expectations that influenced you to decide to move in this community?
Well, we were looking for relocation. We were in a colonial 3-story house, and we thought it was time for 1-story living. We're getting to the senior point of life, and so we were actively looking. I hadn't even thought about the community. I used to live about 8 blocks from the house that we're in now, and I didn't even really, I'd seen them from the highway, but I had not thought about it, and somebody I knew bought one of them. And we came over and we agreed that not having drafts and having insulation and everything was very nice. And I had very good memories of living in town and the convenience to go to the Smithsonian or do a Friday jazz brunch in the sculpture or a jazz event in the sculpture garden or whatever. So I have a lot of positive memories about living in town. And it was the dynamic, walkable community that ultimately won us out. When we traveled, we were scoring towns for possible retirement, and we kept saying, yeah, but you got to get in the car to go do everything. Yeah, you got to get in the car to go do everything. So we decided the dog was young, and we were still going up and down stairs without falling, and so we could go one more 3-story house. So we bought a 3-story house, and we returned to the community a little over 3 years ago. And a lot of our expectations were exceeded immediately because the community was being built from the ground up. Unlike a lot of Washington, where you never even know your next door neighbors, people were actually moving in and they were going through a sequence of events together. So they got to know their neighbors at least immediately ahead and behind them. In the process. So when you moved in, it was like moving into a 1950s subdivision where you suddenly knew all kinds of people around you. And the types of people were obviously a lot more varied. For some people, having lived in town a lot myself, I was used to a lot of different kinds of people, but I noticed that it was an eye-opening experience for a lot of people that had lived in the community and a lot of people new to the community.
So you were a previous resident of this community, and what year did you move to this community originally before it was redevelopment? I just want to get a sense of that.
Okay. I didn't live in the Arthur, just to make sure, I didn't live in the footprint of Arthur Capers, which was in the southeast side of South Capitol. I lived just across over by the Randall School. And
that's close enough.
No, it is. This was my McDonald's over here 30 years ago.
Okay.
Hadn't improved much in 30 years either. But
maybe that's something we need to work on.
That's a whole nother point. But I'm sorry. The living over there, that was in the mid '80s, and I stayed over there. Actually, I lived in Southwest longer than I have lived in any one place in my entire life, and my next major milestone is 60 years old. So in my lifetime, Southwest is what I think of as my adult home.
So how long was that you've lived in Southwest?
I lived there until the mid-90s, so I'd say around 8 years, maybe 8-9 years. I'd have to really see when I moved in and out, but that was the longest I ever lived in one place.
Gotcha. So you have an idea because you lived in the neighborhood per se, but not necessarily Arthur Cappers. You didn't move here, but you were in this general area. What was it like? What did you see in this particular area of?
Well, when I moved here, I was used to walking and hiking a lot. And to live in an urban environment, I still went out for walks. And it was unusual, I think, for people to walk into neighborhoods that maybe weren't their neighborhood back in those days. There were a lot of stairs and even some conversation, people asking me if perhaps I was lost and needed to go somewhere else quickly, and needed directions or something. So it was a very different place. I'm reminded my mother's now in her mid 80s, and she was here visiting, and she remembered all of the gunshots at night. And because we had the open air drug markets were really big in the 80s and all the violence associated with them. And we had, at one point there, I believe in the 90s, we had more murders than we had days of the year. So the grittiness of before the ballpark, before the metro, there was a lot more desperations. Even the common things, we didn't have a cell phone. If you got in a cab and they treated you poorly, there was nothing you could do. You didn't have a cell phone to say, they're discriminating or they won't take me where I want to go. And so there's been a whole lot of changes, both from the people and from technology, that when we moved back, there's really just no comparison to what I found here 30 years ago.
Wow. You lead me to this question as it relates to your diversity experience since you moved here. What does that look like?
A bunch of very positive small experiences.
Tell me something about those small experiences. Give this viewing audience an idea of what has that look like. What does that look like?
Well, I asked something about one of the kids next door. I spoke to them, and he just fell silent. He just looked at me. He didn't answer me at all. And I didn't laugh at him or anything, but I knew in the back of my head he just wasn't used to interacting with someone like me, whatever. And so those little interactions, from dead silence when I spoke to them, to answering if I spoke directly, to actually telling me something about their day on the way home from school. So I went from being real odd to just something that was in the neighborhood and you could talk to it and nothing bad happened, So I guess from the kids' perspective, to just see children opening up to the experience.
Question: can we create this community where we all know, honor, and respect each other? What do you think about that question?
Well, I think, like in a family or any long-term acquaintance, sometimes you have to accept things you don't like. You're not agreeing with them. You're just accepting that for the other person, that's their reality. And to create that community, we have to be able to accept each other, knowing full well that they hold views that we don't share. Rose was just talking about the construction of the community center, which we all are looking forward to. And it didn't go well. And it was not brought back out into the public arena and dealt with, where changes could be made to reflect the new times and things. And it didn't get built with phase 1. And it didn't get built with phase 2. And we all agree our kids need it, but our kids also need outdoor space, which they've built to the perimeter of the building, and there won't be any outdoor space. So our kids aren't getting that. So on that issue, we are as unified could be.
Excellent.
And then, just to show that there's that complex diversity that we have to accept, it's fine to say the children need some place to play. But if the children are damaging people's property, whether they have some place to play or not, they're not respecting their neighbors. So when they get the community center and they're going there, if they haven't learned to respect their neighbor on the way, then tearing that limb off the tree just because or whatever isn't going to help that community be a strong one. So I think that we have to look at not only what we're comfortable with, but we have to look at it from the other person's point of view as well, which is empathy is probably for me, the very beginning of the community getting started, once you can see the other person's point of view.
So if I can dig a little deeper, what do you see yourself doing to create this community where we all know and honor and respect each other?
At this point, I think it's my role is really the very, very small things. A kind word, letting somebody pet the dog. There was a boy getting in terrible trouble with his mother, and she was quite over the line. And when she realized I was standing there, she asked what I was looking at. And I told her quite bluntly what I was looking at, and she was out of control, and she needed to get a grip, and if she didn't, I'd call 911, and they'd give her a grip. Well, I saw that little boy go down the street the other day. He knew there was somebody in this community that knew him and saw him when he walked down that street. But at least he knows in this world that not everybody is, and that somebody looks at him and sees him. So, for me, what I can do, very, very small things.
Nah, but they're very large. They're very large. What you just said was huge, because as you said, and you said it wonderfully, that that little boy knows somebody cares, and if nothing else, he knows somebody cares. Even when things not going the way he would want him to go, or he did something bad, somebody cared enough to say, can we handle this a different way?
And I know we're just now kind of having, just a week or two after this happened, we had began a national dialogue with sports figures, decking their fiancé and beating their children till they bled. And, so I know that at least on that one particular topic, that is even part of what our community will deal with in the future, is an evolving thought about how we interact. And so he got to see there was diversity in our community.
Absolutely. What would you like to see happen as it relates to creating a community where we all know, honor, and respect each other?
I hope that we're going to quit storing poor people and just housing them, and actually just not have another generation just move into the same apartment and just go through the same thing over and over, but people to see other opportunities or other things that they might like to do, and to not repeat that cycle again. And I think sometimes that this is one of the most wonderful things. It lets people that perhaps have only lived with people like them or close enough to them that they never really thought about other things they might do in their life. And it could be somebody who's always just been money, 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 that meets an artist and finds out about passion for something, not just making money. Or it could be somebody that just goes the other way, that they've been, very passionate about what they've done, but they've never really found out how to financially make that go. And maybe through their association with somebody else, they'll learn that skill.
Outstanding, outstanding. Again, I want to thank you for agreeing to be interviewed, and I just say what you've shared with this viewing audience is very valuable, and we need the voices of the people who have been voiceless to be heard, and you come out loud and clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.